Passive income is a lie. So I actually want to know who's lying. There's a big difference between the types of income when it comes to looking at your taxes. And if you've read Robert Kiyosaki's second book, Cash Flow Quadrant, you'll understand that there's 4 different really main categories. While it breaks down into 87,000 pages of IRS code, you might have 4 categories that you can fall into. We talk about being an employee, which is taxed around 40%. We talk about being self-employed, which people think is better than being an employee because you're your own boss. But now you're paying employer and employee taxes. You have both that are yours. So it's about 60%. You have people who own businesses. This is on the passive side. With businesses, you're taxed around 20% because it's on capital gains. And then on the last quadrant, you have investor. Investors are taxed often at 0. And I actually have an example on where last year, as an investor, I was taxed less than 0. So I thought I would take, before I clarify the importance of understanding why passive income is a thing, Matt.
Yeah.
How do you define passive income?
Money that comes in while I sleep. That's passive income for me, because I'm not up actively working to generate income, to generate revenue. Having a W-2 job, I'm there. I get paid to be there. And I get paid when in my case, when my team or I sell something. So it's directly correlated to the effort and, more importantly, to the execution of appearing, showing up, and of the job being accomplished, i.e. the task of selling something to a client. So that's where I look at this as being passive, because every single month when I sleep, somebody else is sleeping in one of my rental units and they're paying me rent to be there. That's how I look at passive.
And to quote Warren Buffett, he says, if you don't find a way of making money while you sleep, you'll work until you die. I completely agree with that. I spent most of my life actually telling my friends and family, I'm one of those guys that's probably going to work until he dies, because until 40, I had never invested effectively and probably never had $1,000 to my name. So it's possible to do what I call reaching passive income in 10 years or less and making work completely optional. So the definition is where a lot of people get hung up on this, where they say, real estate is not passive. You say you're making money while you're sleeping, but your property manager might call you with a building on fire. You might have tenants that don't pay, so then that building isn't passive this month. So there's like this spectrum of people who define passive income. Some people say, I invest in stocks. But then other people say, yeah, but you're watching when to buy and sell. You have to check if your dividends are making sense. You like all of these things that even stock investing is not passive. Even if you're a hard money lender, you are still making sure payments are being made. It's almost like people think passive income needs to be something where you can lay on a bed in an iron lung, so you don't even have to breathe for yourself. The machine will breathe for you, and the money will come in. That's not what I'm worried about when I think of passive income. For me, passive income, the thing that's important is how the IRS looks at it.
Yes.
So there's a category for taxes. I think there's 3, right? Portfolio, earned, passive. There might be one I'm missing there, but I think that's the 3. Somebody can correct me in the comments if you want. And I'm letting people know that this is going to be a live stream that probably goes on for about an hour. So the first topic we're covering is, can real estate be passive? Is real estate investing passive? Is passive income a lie? But the rest of this is going to be about questions you put in the comments, because we're going to get to those within an hour or less. Thank you for hanging out with us in the middle of the day for this random midday live stream, which for me happens on a Saturday, because every day is Saturday. And for Matt, it happens while he is at work. Thanks for being here with me, Matt.
Technically double dipping. Just kidding. Because this doesn't pay me anything.
Right. Here's why the IRS designation is the most important thing to consider. Your W-2 income is taxed around 40%, depending on your tax bracket. And this is putting in Social Security, sometimes union dues, like whatever money is going to come out of it before you have money left. With passive investing to the IRS, the average person earns money, gets taxed, and gets what's left. With passive income, you earn money, get the money, use depreciation and write-offs to reduce the amount of money that you're going to have a tax obligation on, and then pay taxes. That's the differentiator that really matters to me. How am I going to be taxed? I'm not looking at real estate because I'm super lazy and saying, because I'm lazy, I'm going to invest in real estate because it takes very little work. It took a lot of work in the first 10 years. I was buying a property almost every 2 years. So literally every 2 years in the beginning, I was doing one thing. That's how much work this took to make it to where I never have to work again. But now the money comes in while I'm sleeping. Yes, I do have to do some actions. I self-manage my properties. I do tenant turnovers. When a tenant buys a house and moves out, I've had to do that 4 times in 10 years now. So I mean, I'm a pro, but the amount of activity isn't what to me matters on calling it passive. It's, will I get to depreciate my properties against this income? Will it be taxed after expenses? And pretty much almost anything you do can be an expense, because remember, the wrong question is this a tax write-off? And the right question is, how can I make this a tax write-off whenever you're spending money on anything? So for anybody who's been online, been in BiggerPockets, been on the Facebook groups and seen passive income is a lie. The amount of activity you do is not what makes it passive. How the IRS looks at it is what makes it passive. So let me look through here, say howdy to everybody, make sure we got any questions.
Cody and Christian get back to work.
Actually, I was going to send them a link and get them in here.
Come on in.
Cody's not working. He's out at his new resort, managing his resort.
That's what I was saying. He's working.
For the weddings that he gets to be there for, and all the bridesmaids that are going to show. It's a terrible life that Cody has now. Want to trade.
Yeah. Great experience. Really liked my host, Cody.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
We'll go back. So JT from Fort Wayne, Indiana says, Fort Wayne, Indiana has the best cash flow for rentals in the United States. I'm averaging $2,500 rent for $100,000 on a house. That's awesome. Sounds like something worth keeping to yourself. Don't let anybody know. That's awesome.
Those returns are fantastic. That's awesome.
And Cody says, wait, this isn't the daily financial news? No, a little bit late for that. I would say we would do it, but I'm not up when Mike was doing his financial news. I would catch him later.
Yeah. And for me, I'd already been up for 5 hours. So it was kind of like, yeah.
So JT, it took you 11 years to get your rental income above your bills. So that is financial independence. Good timeline. It sure beats working for more than 40 years, more than 40 hours a week to retire on less than 40% of what you were making.
Right.
So sound snags. How do we get this iron lung type of passive income? I'm interested. It seems like that's what people want. They get caught up on the semantics of the word passive. And they're like, oh, I don't want to invest if it requires any effort. And almost nothing is passive that way. Nothing worth having is. Unless you hear of an investment that's going to have a great return and you don't have to do anything for it. Because I want to quote my friend Homer Simpson, who says, if something seems too good to be true, jump on it quick before it goes away.
I mean, again, I think the concept is, something for nothing, right? It's what it's really about is the return on my capital, but also the return on my time invested, right? And when we have a building that we have dialed in, where we have bought the building, we've done a rehab, we've gone through it. Usually what you find in those particular buildings that we've done, where it might be a duplex or a triplex or whatever, you might get 1 or 2 calls in a year on that building. It's almost non-existent. And so is it zero? No. But I guarantee that one call that I'm taking, or the one issue that I have to handle for that, because my mortgage is automated, my water sewer bill is automated, the gas is automated, the oil is automated, all of these other things around the building are automated. So if I have one phone call that I'm going to take that year, I promise you this, there's not many people that make that much money for one phone call.
No. So here's the second half of this, where we give people a chance to get some questions into the comments. We have 2 different investing strategies. You have built a real estate monster of a machine that is continuing to grow. You self-manage. So like our friend Michael Zuber from One Rental at a Time, he uses property manager. So he's even less hands-on, more passive, but he still has to manage the property manager. So it doesn't qualify in that iron lung type of passive income that people think exists. But let's go over our amount of time and commitment for the income streams that we have, whether they're passive or working. So I ran a truck driving school. I was an instructor for a few years, was slowly demoted down to president of the company, right? And kind of had golden handcuffs where I would own 10% if a sale ever happened. So I was kind of an owner, but not really of the company, just in case of a sale. I worked 50 to 60 hours a week as an instructor or manager. And at any time I can get a call at midnight, 5 o'clock in the afternoon as an employee or as a manager saying, here's the change that's happening with work. So my W-2 could be as time intrusive as owning a property that the call could come in at any time. The truck driving school trains from 6 a.m. to midnight because there are 2 shifts. And as an instructor who was trying to work his way up the corporate ladder, I was available all the time. So my W-2 was a lot more demanding than the 2 to 4 hours that I've managed properties. What does your W-2 timeline look like when you're not on a Friday doing a live stream with your friend and still trying to work?
I mean, I think that we do probably right now, and it's way heavier than it should be. I was actually looking at the comments. I saw a cursey face, and that always gets my attention.
Get right. That's how you get Matt's attention.
Exactly. So we're probably right now, because we're in the middle of we're in the process of about $700,000 worth of remodels right now. And so right now it's heavier than it normally would be. So I'd say right now we're between 30 and 40 hours a week between myself and my wife. And I'd say that will probably go down to 15 to 20 when we're just managing. But we're going through, like I said, about $700,000 worth of upgrades and updates and rehabs. That's actually 13 units. And so that's 10% of my portfolio right now. I have that's being rehabbed, and gut to studs rehab, not just like light rehab. So that's where we're spending just a lot of our time right now, because it's that much more paperwork. It's the billing, it's the submission to the bank for, reimbursement. It's all of those steps and pieces. And then it's the normal tenant load. And now adding on, what's going on with the rental apocalypse, like what we've done videos about this week. You can check those out on Lumberjack Landlord, but including the rental apocalypse, I expect our time commitment probably is going to go up. But again, that's 135 units, no property management. And that series will probably be over in the next 12 weeks, I would guess, is what we're going to really see as a reduction to our time, 12 weeks.
So the amount of work it takes to get to that passive income is a lot. But
yeah,
Sound Snag says, getting a property dialed in is huge. And I agree. Earlier this year, I kind of tricked you and Michael Zuber into doing a portfolio review for me and telling me what my options are before I retired, which kind of led to me retiring. And we talked about a property I have that's paid off on whether you do a cash out refinance, take out a home equity line of credit, or sell the property in 1031, and all these options. But the most important thing that you pointed out about that property is the importance of having a dialed in tenant. Right. I've talked to that tenant twice.
Yes.
In 12 months.
Right.
Once was a question, like had nothing to do with real estate. And the other was, it's a Section 8 thing, and Section 8 made a change with their portion that they were paying, and the tenant contacted me to make sure I got that's it, to talk to that tenant. So a dialed in tenant is amazing. I completely agree with that. We have
probably 60 units that have not logged a call with us this year. But how do you get to 60 that don't log a call with you? You take care of the unit, you've upgraded the roof, the plowing was, taken care of. All of these things when it comes to the management of the business to get this passive income. Again, that's how the IRS deems it as passive. But again, 60 units, I've not talked to any of the tenants in those units, 60 of them this year.
Here's something that you can add to your portfolio to be more like Matt, in that you have that many units that don't talk to you. And I have several units that I haven't talked to that have had issues. So when you develop your relationships with your contractors and handymen, more so your handymen, and I've had men and women handymen, but that's just what people call them. And they've interacted with the tenant. So the tenant is comfortable with them. They have a threshold. My handyman knows that if the thing is less than $500 and can be handled without having to order expensive parts, they can do the work and then bill me. And as long as you have that relationship and you monitor it like you would anything else.
That's right.
There are things happening with my rentals that I get an email on a couple of weeks later. And that's all it takes. And then there's a question here from Art. Howdy, Art. Finished up a flooded unit remodel. First time hiring contractor headache. How have you dealt with firing them for poor work? I'll let you go first if you like. You've done more rehabs than me. So
the first thing I do is I want to have a meeting with them. Sit down and go over what my expectation was and find out if what my expectation was unreasonable. And usually you can find, in the question that I always ask them is, if that was the job that somebody did for you based on what we discussed, would you be happy? And you can tell right away if they say yes and they're lying. I mean, just like, yeah, no. Telling ain't selling, bro. Telling ain't selling. So let's talk about it. And so I would just walk through that with them, have the conversation, say, listen, I would love to be able to do work with you again. I'd love to be able to recommend you. But the challenge that I have is based on what I'm seeing, I don't feel like I got what I paid for. And this is my expectation. Tell me where that's wrong. And then at the end of the day, the challenge that you have is depending on which state you're in, they can actually put a mechanics lien on your property pretty easily for $4,000 or $5,000. It's literally a piece of paper that they have to fill out. And so then the only other option that you have to go against that is you have to sue them in small claims court to get that lien lifted. So that's your time, that's your effort, that's your energy. Now, there are guys that have won as far as like going back and, showing the work and saying it's shoddy work, it's subpar workmanship, et cetera, et cetera. That's when you then lean on the contract to what the contract actually said. So sadly, if you're not getting what you want from your contractor, it's not something that you can handle arm's length. It's something you are going to have a conversation and don't get emotional about it. Be very conversational and just say, all right, at this point, there's nothing, I lose nothing by suing you because the work wasn't done and I can show that it wasn't done into what we had agreed to via text messages or emails or contract. And in the small claims court, it's only more likely than not, if you can prove your case, more likely than not that you win. If it's a criminal case, you have a massive burden of doubt. But if it's a civil case like this in small claims, it's only more likely than not. So if you do decide to pursue that path, don't be afraid of it. Have the conversation with them. Try and get that remedied. If you then can't get that remedy, then send them an email saying, this is everything that we covered. My hope is to not go the next level and go the next step. But if I need to pursue this in court, then that's what I will do. I await this to be your answer in this amount of time. That way, when you go in front of the judge, you actually can have that conversation and say, Your Honor, I walked it with them. They still believe they didn't do anything wrong. Here are all the pictures. Here's all the text messages where there was disagreement. And then we met. They said they weren't going to do anything. I then followed it up with a letter. I gave them another 5 days to respond. They still didn't follow up with anything. And that's why I find myself here today in front of you having this conversation, because I need you to arbitrate the situation and mediate the situation to put me in a position where I believe I was wronged and I believe that they were subpar. And this is why I want this amount of credit back, because I need to get it repaired by somebody who's willing to do the job right. Not that I've ever done this before.
And here are 3 things that I do to try to get a better response from contractors, get things done on time, and sometimes get the best price. First, I like to get my contractors from the Thumbtack app. So I'm not just using Google to find contractors, because that will show you all the contractors in your area. What Thumbtack does is it finds you contractors who are a little tech savvy, so they're on the Thumbtack app, and they know that you're going to get to leave a review when the work is done, and their reputation on that app is made or broken by those reviews. Second, I like to share the quotes between contractors, and some people always think that you're sharing quotes like you share quotes with a lender to say, this is the rate you need to beat to keep my business. You're showing quotes to contractors to say, this is what the competition is charging. Can you beat it? But you're also showing the contractor that you have other contractors that can do the work. So they're not your only person you can dance with. And the third thing I like to do is structure the payments to where you get the quote from the contractor, you're comfortable with it. You figure out what kind of bonus or tip that you would do depending on the scope or size, because I haven't done full rehabs. I've done things like build a deck, add in ceiling fans, really simple things, flooring, that doesn't take complete gut rehabs like Matt the lumberjack landlord has. But I say, look, there's an extra $500 if this is done by this day. So those are the three things I like to do. Make sure that your contractors are found from a source where their reviews matter and they know you're going to get to leave a review at the end. Make sure that the contractor knows that they're not the only contractor you're working with or could work with, and use money as an incentive instead of a punishment. So yes, if the work isn't done, you're not going to pay and then you can sue. But if they're working towards a bonus, they're more likely to continue working with you. And then you can show, like someone like Matt the lumberjack landlord can do, and say, I have 135 units. If you work with me and you do good work, here's all the work you're going to get in the future. If you have 1 or 2 units, you can say, look, we live in the same area. I'm going to be growing a rental portfolio. I would like to have a contractor that I can use in the future. That gives you some negotiation power.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
I was making it short. Sorry.
I was going to say, you really want my excellent impact added there, excellent input added there. So lastly on that topic was, I'm teasing. So lastly on that topic, we actually had, we're 5 years old. So we just had a painter. He came to us. He said, hey, listen, I'm going to paint. I'm a great painter. Would love an opportunity to do some of your units. I said, I actually had a unit coming available. I just finished with my painter. He said, yeah, I can get to it in 2 weeks. I go, 2 weeks isn't good enough. And I said, but that's fine. If that's the fastest you can get me in, it is what it is. I reached out to a couple of people that said that they could paint. This guy reaches back out to me and says, hey, I can paint at night and I can paint on the weekends. I was like, look at you, you go-getter. And so he said, I will paint it. He's like, I'll be there Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night. I can get it done. And he's like, are you good with that? And I said, yeah, so long as you're not playing loud music until 12 a.m., just because that's how you groove out. Put it in your earbud. And he's like, yep, sure, no problem. So he painted the entire unit. Now, here's the awesome side hustle for this guy. $850. He painted the entire unit. He got it done in 3 nights. I was very happy with the work. He was happy with the $850. And what did he get? He's already gotten, this was last week. This was 10 days ago. He's already gotten 3 other jobs from me. 3 other jobs. He now is working during the day all day long, but at nights and weekends, he's doing my stuff. And he's banking basically about $800, $900 a weekend. Like, that's all that guy would actually have to work. So he's killing it. And you know what? God bless him. I love contractors like that. Good for him.
Yeah, sometimes it's really good to have the negotiation power of saying, here's other work I can give you. And that might be, I know other investors I can refer you to. It doesn't even have to always be your project. So howdy, Invest and Kris, good to see you guys. All Nighter Hider, question. Do you pretty much consider a tenant as a passive business partner?
No.
So choose wisely. That was my knee-jerk reaction too, Matt, was like, no, they're not a business partner.
No, because at the end of the day, a partner is just as responsible as you are for fixing the problem. And this is a service business. So they're not my partner. They don't have any ownership. I would never use that word with them ever, because that gives them a sense of even more entitlement and even more ownership. And that's not what we're here for. I am the owner. You are the renter. I am a service to you. And if something needs to be taken care of that's in my sphere, then I will take care of it. If a light bulb is out or your fridge is dirty, that is on you. You need to take care of it. So I would never use that word. And I'm not trying to be aggressive, but that word, if somebody ever says, well, we're really partnering on this, I would probably slug them. So I'd be like, we're not partnering on this. I'll send you.
It's a great question from All Nighter, and it was worded perfectly. He says, do you kind of probably sort of consider, great, because we know it's not. But here's something that the question spurred that is a good point, to think of them like a partner, to not use the word, let them know that they could have ownership because they're a tenant, right? But here's where you want to think of it the same. If you have a partnership, if you're going to create an LLC and do some investing with friends, family, or somebody you met, you put everything in writing while you're getting along, because it's really hard to negotiate something later when everybody's upset, right? So look at that tenant like a partner, in that everything needs to be in writing before they move in. Here's the lease, here's the late payments, here's the pet policy, here's everything spelled out in legalese. So that's the one type of thing from similarity to a partnership that I would take. But just like Matt said, I would take that thought off the table with the tenant. We have had some legislators try to put in processes where tenants have part ownership of the property without any of the risk, without any of the cost of repairs in the future that are more than what the rent would cover. No bueno.
Yeah, I mean, I've had tenants that, we've bought the building and they've been there for 28 years. And they're like, no, let me tell you how this is going to go. I was like, sorry, the building was for sale on MLS. You could have bought it. You chose not to. That makes me in charge. So while I want to work with you, and they were like, well, this old landlord was promising this, that, and the other. I go, he cared about that commitment so much that he sold me the building. He clearly did not want to do that work. So I'm willing to work with you, but this is what it is. And then on top of that, I then saw the estoppel, which is basically a listing of what somebody's paying and what their lease terms are. It's a copy of their lease. It's done before closing. I saw a copy of that, and he was paying $700 for a market rent unit of $2,000. So I've got bad news.
Imagine why that owner had to sell.
That's why that owner had to sell. He said, I can't, if you ever utter the words, I can't afford to rent this place out anymore, you're doing it wrong. You did it wrong.
I would have to agree. Normally, I would never tell people, hey, you're doing it wrong, and use a strong word like wrong. But if you're saying, I've never raised the rent because I have great tenants, and then, so if that's your policy and you are profitable, great.
Awesome. Sure.
If you have to sell because you can't afford to fix it, you were doing it wrong. Howdy, Cody. This is a good question. What expense threshold would you expect to call or text from your property management? I know you both don't have one, but if you did, what amount would you want to be notified?
Probably a couple $100, but I can tell you one thing I would absolutely be doing. If I started seeing things occurring at a $200 rate often, I'd be watching them. Because with the challenge that you have is, I think what Dion does is a great process. And I think it's a great model when you have 16 units. The challenge that you have is when you have 135, I can tell you exactly how much time it takes to manage 135 units. And so if I started seeing, that's interesting, after I gave them permission to do this, I used to get 3 calls a week. Now I'm seeing 13 charges a month. Because that means that they might just be listening to the tenants. Like literally, I've had tenants call and say, I need you to change out a couple light bulbs. That's a you thing. That's not a me thing. And the company might say, it's under $200. I'll just go change it. And then they go change it. And then I get a bill, but I get a bill for the call that they took. I get a bill for the service time, and I get a bill for the light bulbs. And then I see that I just paid $150 to change out 2 light bulbs. Hell no, that ain't happening.
Well, a superpower that you develop by managing your own properties before you hire a property manager is having a reasonable expectation on how long it takes to do something. Like I did deck repairs with my handyman before I would just say, oh, you go repair the deck. Now I know how long and how much it should cost. So if you have a track record of what your expenses are, it's easier to recognize when a pattern shifts by a property management company just doing repairs. I would have the same rule with the property manager that I do with my tenants right now. $500 or less would go through the property management. Matt used the term notified. I want notified if it costs a penny. I should get an email for any expense. But you said, Cody, in your question, call or text. For me, that's the $500 threshold. I would monitor it to see if it was happening more frequently than before. I would also communicate with tenants occasionally to make sure that things that were done were actually done. Kind of like we have with the Medicaid system, where somebody goes in with a sprained ankle and has a fictitious kidney operation that never happened and gets billed for it. You want to make sure you're only paying for things that actually happen. So trust but verify, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then I would teach my PM the 3 words I teach my tenants. If you're going to call me, here are the 3 words. If these 3 words are going to be in the conversation, you're going to call me. And it's okay if I'm your second call. Fire, flood, or blood. If those 3 words are in this conversation, maybe call 911 first. Then I'm your second call. Other than that, it should be a text, and I don't mind text at any time. But anything important, I move to emails because you need to know your local laws in my state. Texts are not admissible in court and emails are. So if anything you think that might be referenced again 2 or 3 years from now, make sure it's an email communication.
So we have one thing that we actually do where we just add one thing to that. If it's gas, fire, flood, or blood, because we have natural gas here in the streets that actually runs into apartments. We also have propane gas that might be into heating systems. And so the only thing that we ask is gas, fire, flood, or blood. We want to get a call. But on the gas side, well, we always tell them all 4 of those examples, you should be making 1 call before you call us.
Right. And I'm not in Siberia, so we don't have the gas problem. All-Nighter Hider puts it into really good words. Fire sooner than later. Take twice as long to hire than to fire. That's good advice for management, for property management, for contractors.
Yes.
And then All-Nighter Hider says there's 3 steps: contract directly, contact with a mediator, and then you resort to statutory courts. Right.
I've worked with a mediator, and all honesty, I didn't really like it. I thought because they were trying to preside over the case and they didn't understand construction. And it was constantly like, well, but I think what they're saying, listen, I don't need help with the English language. What I need is your understanding of construction to be at my level and at the contractor's level so we can have that conversation, because you think that's fine. You don't know that that's not code. I digress.
Tony points out that it's funny that you said we were 5-year-olds because it's true. And I agree.
I mean,
there's a question for Matt from Invest to Wealth.
Wealthy 5-year-olds.
But I work as much as a 5-year-old, although they have to go to school.
But see, I wish that I had this kind of money when I was 5.
Right. Matt, when you're renting out, this is from Invest to Wealth, out to 2 or 3 college students, how do they pay their rent, individually or pay their portion?
Yes. I don't have any. So the way that we do it is we will, some do it one way and some do it another. So some kids don't feel comfortable with paying that way and they need to prove that they're paying their landlord. We do a lot with, and I know that a lot of people think against it, but we do a lot with with Venmo. Hemlane talks about not doing it in Venmo. We do a lot in Venmo. We do stuff in PayPal. But we do some of that stuff that way. But we actually, when you're trying to pay me, there's nothing more important to me that you're able to have as many ways possible to pay me. So I want you to pay me cash. I want you to pay me check. I want you to pay me money order, Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, like literal ACH. I want you bank check. Yes. US funds, we are available. I mean, in time, we might even take Bitcoin or Ethereum.
So when it comes to rent collection, there are 3 things that matter to me. First, and most important, easy on the tenant. I want them to have several options because you don't know the background of the person. So one of the really hard things is when people try to change how a tenant pays. That usually leads to a tenant turnover. So like you, it's check, Apple Pay, Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, whatever format works. Second thing is I want it to leave an electronic paper trail. Because one of the concerns people say is, well, if somebody pays you with Venmo, they could take the money back. They could take the money back with a check too, up to 14 days later, right out of your account, like the transaction never happened. So that can happen in all kinds of forms of payment. And people say, if you're going through an eviction and they make a partial payment, that it resets the eviction process. Only if those funds go to you. If you put them into a holding account, you could take your Venmo or PayPal or Apple Cash payment, put into a holding account, document that you did that. That doesn't reset the eviction.
The other thing you can do too, though, is you can also, so in our state law is somebody can give you that payment so long as you give them an answer back saying, thank you for your payment in this amount of dollars. This does not stop the eviction process.
There you go. So know your local laws. And the third thing is, since I'm super lazy and I like to keep my property management around 2 hours as much as I can, some months it'll go more, especially when you have a tenant turnover.
Or a well.
Or you sit around wait. I looked at that well. I spent an hour and a half that day, so that added to the months.
But that day, like
that
you
day, right.
like you like were 200% more in a month what you spend
in a day, right? Yeah. So it can add up, right? I want to make sure that receiving rent payments doesn't make me go to the bank.
Yeah.
So I've had some tenants that don't have checking accounts and they can't do ACH and they can't Venmo and they can't. They've messed up every type of payment system there is out there. So they'll send a check or a money order. And that some of those have to go to the bank. So that's a tenant that needs a new system. So
Yes.
Cody and Christian point out that every time you hit the like button, someone retires before Matt. It's not how they said it, but that's how I interpreted it. Okay.
Dion, you damn liar.
Exactly. Okay. Well, I'm going to give it just a couple more minutes here to see if there's any more questions before we wrap this up. The premise of this video was, is passive income a lie? And if you weren't here at the beginning, it's not so much how much time or effort you put into the income. It's, in my opinion, how does the IRS look at it? Because if you are working for your income, you're going to be taxed, and usually at the highest amount. If you have passive income, the actual category that they put rental income in, you get to depreciate and take write-offs before you have a tax obligation. And at the beginning of the video, I talked about me having a negative tax obligation with rental properties. Even though I had 6 figures of profit in 2021, I carried forward an $8,900 loss against the income that I'm going to make in 2022. Passive income, not something you could do with your W-2.
That's true.
And people say you should definitely take Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yes, in the future, it's something we certainly will do. I think the challenge, though, with a lot of folks is the amount that they have in Bitcoin. Largely, I mean, unless it goes back to 80,000 bucks again, their 1/10 of a coin, it's not even, it's not even a month's rent. So.
Yep. And then I want to make sure I'm not skipping over this. A couple of people compliment you on how witty you are and how good you are with your comeback. So on the header, sometimes I agree.
Thank you.
I can't keep up. And then yes, most banks allow an app deposit with a photo. The problem is, it's either money orders or cashier's checks. It literally says this is not meant for deposit via apps right on the check. So those are the ones to avoid. And it's usually somebody who, I don't know what their financial situation is, but it's the only way that they can get a check is by going in with cash to get the check. Yeah. And then those can't be deposited.
Yeah. And the other thing too, Art, that's a really good point. I think the other thing too is we have multiple banks that we worked with, and we reconciled our books every single month. We tried the online thing. We had with one bank, we had 2 checks not accounted for in a 6-month period, and another one we had 3. That can't happen. That just can't happen. The tech needs to be there. It needs to be better. And so it's just, I don't think it's there yet. It's very good, but unless it's perfect.
And then Rob has a really good suggestion here. He says that I need to recommend a razor for Matt so he can finish the haircut. So this is called a crystal shaver. You should get one of these. Kind of takes everything off really good. Doesn't cut through the skin. I'll put a link to this on Amazon in the description below at the end of this video. This is the sponsor of today's video, the crystal shaver.
The difference is that Dion and I both shaved our heads 2 weeks ago, and this is what happened to mine.
Exactly.
So. Hey, I'm just very thankful up here. Plenty. We don't have to worry about that anywhere else. It's good.
I'll be wrapping this up. I want to thank everybody for hanging out. And one day I'll make a video that doesn't have a joke in it, but I'm sorry, Matt. I was told I had a choice. Testosterone or hair.
Yeah.